What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Points Per Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by both my co-hosts once again, Will and Vishy. Thank you guys for being here. They're here to help me talk about some of the best and worst fantasy football values by division. Today, we're talking about the AFC South. We've already covered 4 divisions in this series so far, so if you guys are interested in any of that, please do go check those out. And also hit that sub button so you can stay up to date with the rest of our releases in this series. And also to let you guys know, we're covering the whole spectrum in terms of perspectives for these videos. We're talking about best ball values, redraft values, and dynasties. So regardless of the format that you're playing in, you should be able to take something away from these videos. We got a lot of players to talk about, so let's get right into it. I will pull up our second screen that shows us the values for different formats. And Vishy, I'm going to start with you. We're going to go into the Jaguars because I think they're probably the most interesting team of the division. Who are you targeting from this team?
Oh boy, this is a fun one. I think it's one that might be difficult to project because they have like an undisputed wide receiver one with BTJ, but he didn't really kind of show that last year. I'm gonna just jump ship from the pass catchers and go to a running back with Bashal Tutin. I think he was a pretty highly rated prospect. I think a lot of analysts were high on him last year. Granted, he had some competition in front of him, and now that that's kind of gone this year, I think while there is kind of like a crowded, maybe pretty talented, but crowded receiver room, I think he has a decent kind of straightforward path just to being the RB1 on a team that was a really good offense last year and could continue to be a really good offense this year.
I like it. One question for you.
Sure.
Apologies to put you on the spot, but people seem to be pretty bothered by the Chris Rodriguez signing. Do you have any thoughts on that and the competition between the two of them?
Yeah, I think he could make the situation a little murkier than I or any Tootin head would want it to be.
Yeah,
I do. I'm a Tootin head, but I still think he is more talented. I think Chris Rodriguez will have a role. I think he's good enough too. And with some of the coach speak and reporting coming out, I think it's inevitable that he has a non-trivial role in the offense. But I think Tootin is going to kind of do a lot of the pass catching. And also B, just get enough volume to still justify his cost, which he would pull it up as an RB3. I think that's a little lower than what it should be. So I think ultimately that makes him a target. Chris Rodriguez could actually also be a sneaky target later on as well. I'm not quite exactly sure where his IDP lies. I'm going to pull that up, but yeah, a little bit after. Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I think Tootin's a target. I think Chris Rodriguez could be an intriguing pick in the 120s.
Yeah, Liam Cohen running backs, always a good idea. But Will, what do you think?
Yeah, from a dynasty perspective, I was actually looking at Chris Rodriguez as one of those late, targets or somebody who's a cheap target that you can get onto your team just because the Jags offense should be a pretty good offense. He's tied to Liam Cohen going back all the way to college. And right now he's like the RB50 on keep trade cut. So I just think it's one of those where if Bashal Tutin weren't to start out very hot, he would be the guy that they lean towards. But also, even if they do split time, like Vishy is saying, and Bashal Tutin's the pass catching back, I think there is a role for Chris Rodriguez to be a goal line back for this offense and to still have a lot of value, or at least a good amount of value for where he's going.
Yeah, I agree. I think both of those guys could be pretty valuable, especially where they're going in drafts right now. I kind of have a lot of targets to talk about, but maybe I'll try to consolidate it down. I think the most interesting conversation is definitely trying to decipher between the pass catchers on this team. And for that reason, I think it's pretty easy to target a guy like Trevor Lawrence. He's easily my favorite target at QB9 prices. I think, he's coming off of the best year of his career, and also coming into another year of comfort in that Liam Cohen offense, which I think is definitely something worth noting because we saw how it started at the beginning of last season. It was kind of a rough start. But once they hit their stride, after week 12 or so, I think he was the QB1 for the remainder of the season, averaging a crazy 28 points per game at quarterback. So that was pretty insane. After being outside the top 20 through the first 12 weeks. He's currently the QB9 in best ball, and I think the QB11 in dynasty. And so regardless of the format, he's definitely somebody I'm buying into.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good take. I think that coaching change brought out something in him, and I think he's kind of hitting close to his max potential here.
Yeah. And then Before we move on, I'm going to force you guys into having some takes on these wide receivers. I want to know what y'all think about the wide receiver room, even if you're not necessarily strongly targeting or avoiding anybody relative to ADP. What are your thoughts here? Vishy, let's go to you first.
Oh, man, you're not even going to toss me a name? You're just going to ask me my thoughts?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, man. I mean, I think that the range of outcomes for each one of the guys on this team, BTJ, Parker Washington, Travis Hunter, and even Jacoby Myers, let's toss him in there. I think it spans the range of being the wide receiver 1 on the team to being the wide receiver 4 on the team. I think it's so hard to project. Yeah. And like fantasy aside, I think it's really plausible to see a resurgence from Brian Thomas Jr. I think I saw like a lot of kind of reporting coming out saying he might have been partially hurt, not fully recovered. He might have had some personal issues going on as well that he alluded to. I think it's kind of fluke. I think that there's not much precedent of a player having such success and talent in the first year and it dropping off that steeply that I think we're primed to see him kind of come back. And so honestly, I think the pick I'd be most confident in this year really is Brian Thomas, even though he has a higher cost than the other 3 receivers I mentioned.
Okay. Will?
Yeah, I agree with that take. I think Brian Thomas Jr., he's due for a bounce back. I think last year he just knew he was on my fantasy team, so things were going bad. But, otherwise, if I were to pick any other guy, I think we'll see some success from this offense alongside Brian Thomas Jr. I'm really interested in Parker Washington and what he can do. He's really kind of emerged as one of like the best route runners on the team in terms of separation, just getting open. He's been extremely good at it and consistently good at it. So, again, I think this is just one of those offenses that we got to look at that last the way the season ended and kind of roll that momentum into next season, but just also kind of insert that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be a guy again for this team. Hopefully that he's fully healthy now, because I did see those same reports that Vish saw.
Yeah. So I'm also into Parker Washington. I do have him as a target, especially in Dynasty, because I think he's going like beyond wide receiver 40, significantly behind a lot of the other guys. Let's check on that. Wide receiver 41. The coach speak on him this offseason has been really, really favorable. It sounds like he's going to continue to play the majority of his snaps out of the slot for a team that runs a lot of 11 personnel. Liam Cohen's slot receivers historically have been fantastic, whether we're talking about Cooper Kupp breaking fantasy his 1 year, Wan'Dale Robinson's season at Kentucky, Chris Godwin's hyper-productive season in Tampa before it got cut short due to injury. And we saw, that Parker Washington could kind of be next in line for that during that same stretch that I referred to with Trevor Lawrence. The last 5 weeks of the season, he averaged over 100 yards per game while no other receiver was above 45. And so I just think, considering he's going as late as he is, especially in Dynasty, I think he's probably more reasonably priced in best ball. Where was he at? He's here at wide receiver 35. But he's somebody that I'm willing to put my money on in this group. Travis Hunter, maybe the least likely outcome is that he ends up as the wide receiver 1, but I think that he's just so talented that it's possible. And considering how cheap he is right now, let's check on that as well. Travis Hunter is all the way down at wide receiver 91 in an offense this good that drafted him so high. Like, the investment in him is crazy. They're incentivized to use him. So I'm buying into Travis Hunter as well, even if Parker and Travis Hunter would eat into each other's roles. Like, if they're kind of redundant to one another, I'm willing to make both bets and just see which one kind of wins. And then I know I've been yapping for a bit, but to just kind of play devil's advocate with Brian Thomas, I fully agree with what you guys said. It's crazy to think that he could have gone from the heights of his first year to the lows that he had last year. And so it can be kind of hard to let go of what he did early on. But he did that in a different offense, under a different coaching staff, really with a different quarterback for the majority of his breakout year, and with a completely different role. I hate to say it, but during that same stretch that I referred to with Trevor Lawrence and Parker Washington, when the offense was hitting its stride, BTJ was relegated to like a sacrificial X role. He was pinned to the sideline and ran 30% go routes. Like, he was just clearing out for other receivers. I'm not saying that's going to continue. I do think that he was injured for a good part of last year and dealing with things. He's too talented to only be used that way. But I don't know. The vibes are kind of bad. They've talked about, trade rumors and things. It just has me worried for BTJ.
No, I can definitely 100% see that.
Maybe maybe they should have thrown him 30% of the time on the sideline, man. That's convincing. I think that's a big part of the risk. Like, yeah, there've been trade rumors, and you're right. The scheme has changed. I didn't reference that, and that could kind of, like last year, could just be predictive of what the future will actually look like. But yeah, I think certainly the talent is there.
For sure. All right, avoids on this team. Will, do you have any specific ones?
I wouldn't really call it an avoid, but if you are a team that is rebuilding and you have Trevor Lawrence on your roster, he is someone you could possibly tear down or, trade away just based on those last 5 games. I know right now he's like the QB 11, but I'm sure people will value him a lot higher than that, especially based on how the season ended last year. Like if he had gotten a full sample size of what they were doing those last 5 weeks, this value would have gone through the roof. Like Trevor Lawrence really kind of showed people at least what they had drafted him for in the first place. So,
Trevor Lawrence being right below Jackson right there.
That is kind of crazy.
Man, not gonna lie. Go ahead.
I get what you're saying 100%. That like if we take the bigger sample size of even just last season, like excluding the rest of his career where he's been relatively disappointing, then maybe he is kind of at his peak value right now, and you might want to capitalize on that. But my perspective is that I'm kind of leaning on that end of the season to be what we see going forward. So just depends where you fall on that end of the spectrum with Trevor Lawrence, I guess.
Absolutely.
Cool. And then I'll be brief as an avoid. I think any of the pass catchers could really kind of become the guy or score a ton of points in any given game. So I don't necessarily want to call out any of the receivers here. I'm just going to pivot to their tight end, Brenton Strange. And I think, like pointing at a tight end one on a good offense kind of can be risky. Like he is the only one of the only good tight ends there. Like he's probably going to get some volume, right? But I think it's just difficult to project. And I think there's maybe a little name recognition, a little tight to being tied to a good offense. It's raising his ADP a little bit. But if I remember right, the tight ends that go right after him, at least in the best ball ADP, were like Hunter Henry, and I think you have it up. It's Chig a little bit further below. Even Dalton Schultz. And I think like many of these guys, I think I'd prefer to target actually maybe all 3 of those guys, or at least 2 of them, primarily because some of them have less competition in the offense of their team. I think Hunter Henry, kind of barring Eli Raridon's maybe breaking out as rookie, like I think he really could have put together another decent season, kind of a little under the radar. And so if anything, and if I had to pick one, I think Brenton Strange I looked this up earlier, and he had 2 double-digit fantasy points games last year in a full PPR, which is, 2 is not that, like basically there's very little difference in him and likely the 20th or 30th tight end off the board. And so at that point, maybe I'm not too interested in kind of targeting him as the rounds go by.
Will, what do you think?
No, I can get with that. In terms of receiving options, things are pretty crowded over there. Brenton Strange did have some good games, though. I will say he's not someone that'd be completely off my radar, but like you said, he's not someone I'm scrambling to get either.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, I think, as Will, where like he's not a hard fade. I don't know that he is for you either, Vishy, like a truly strong fade necessarily.
But if I needed tight end 2, or if it's redraft, I'm saying, screw it, I want a tight end 2. Like I think it's a very fair option. But
it's also worth noting that the team drafted 2 tight ends. Whether or not there'll be like significant receiving competition for him, I don't know. The first one, I don't even know how you say his name, like Borkacher or whatever it is. He's primarily a blocking guy, I think. Tanner Kozoil, if I even said that one right, had a prolific receiving career, but at against pretty bad competition. So we'll see what that means. But if anything, I could see that being depressing his value a little bit.
Absolutely.
Will, do you have any specific avoids before we go on to the next team?
No, that's all I got.
That is fair enough. There's a lot to kind of sort through in that Jaguars offense. So hopefully you guys took something away from that. But let's go to the Colts. And Will, we can start with you. Who's your favorite target on this team?
My favorite target on this team is honestly either of the wide receivers that are still there between Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, just because of the value. Like Alec Pierce right now is the wide receiver 31. Josh Downs is the wide receiver 38. And no matter how you cut it, these 2 are going to be part of what is going to be a 3-headed monster when it comes to this passing attack, meaning the 2 of them and Tyler Warren. Because coming out the backfield, there really isn't too much of a threat back there. Jonathan Taylor's more of a rusher than a pass catcher, even though he can catch passes if they need him to. The scariest thing here is just QB play that's holding it back. But, the way I'm looking at it, Daniel Jones did find a lot of success last year that none of us really saw coming. And he was also re-signed to this team for, multiple years in the future. So if they're able to recreate any of what they saw, and with these two guys at the helm of it, with, Alec Pierce coming off his first 1,000-yard season, and Josh Downs just actually getting the role that we thought he was going to get now that Michael Pittman's gone, I'm in on both of these guys if they're able to find that same or at least similar levels.
Yeah, man, I'm going to contribute very little here. I like pretty much everything you said. If I had to pick one at cost, I think it would probably be Josh Downs, simply because he's cheaper. And I really do think, I think he might be a little bit more talented than Alex Pierce. But if you factor in cost, I think that makes it even easier of a decision for me. I don't have too much to add. He's going to be a wide receiver 1A or 1B on an offense that could be decent again if Daniel Jones does come back playing like kind of how he started off last year playing. I think those are excellent targets at pretty cheap prices. Yeah,
I agree as well. If I had to pick, I would also probably pick Downs between the two, but I think both of them are reasonable. I think that Downs is just probably more consistent of a target earner. The problem for him throughout his career has been that he couldn't get on the field in two wide receiver sets. He would pretty much exclusively play out of the slot. And, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but we have gotten some coach speak so far this offseason with Michael Pittman gone. The coaching staff is talking about Josh Downs playing more in two wide receiver sets this season. So I think that would be a huge boost for his value in both Dynasty and in Best Ball. And then my target, specifically in Best Ball, although I think you could potentially try to buy him in Dynasty, is Tyler Warren. He led the team in targets and receptions last year for the full season, and through the first 10 weeks prior to Daniel Jones fracturing his fibula, which then he played through and then tore his Achilles. But before he got injured at all, Tyler Warren was pretty dominant. He was the tight end 6, averaging 13.6 points per game. And he was like essentially doing that through 3/4 of football every week because the Colts were absolutely blowing teams out. They were scoring 32 points per game with an average point differential of almost 12 points. So by the time they got to the fourth quarter, it was just clock management. So I think those numbers could go up. And then as both of you guys have already alluded to, the fact that Michael Pittman is gone and is vacating 111 targets is going to be a big boost for all of the pass catchers in this offense. But considering Tyler Warren in his rookie year was already the team's leading receiver, I just think that it's going to be the biggest boost for him.
I agree with that. I love Tyler Warren. I think he's going to have a big season this year.
I think he's going to have a massive season. And if we want to shift over to avoids, I don't have a strict avoid here necessarily. I actually kind of even like Daniel Jones at cost. I think he's pretty cheap, and if we can bet on his health, I think he could have a decent season. I like JT in the first round. So I'm not going to list any avoids, but I think I'll frame it this way. I don't think I'll have much Tyler Warren this year. I think he is excellent. And I think this is kind of anecdotal, just coming from some of the mocks I've done or any of the best ball drafts that I've done so far. I think he's going to have a monster season. I think, unfortunately, people know that. And so I haven't been able to get him without it. It would have had to be a reach looking back at the drafts I've done.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason I won't get him is that, first of all, I don't think necessarily the names I'm about to say are in his tier or better than him by any means. But the names that come after him a round later, he's tight end 4 in best ball ADP. A round later is Harold Fannin and Tucker Kraft back to back. I'm not necessarily the highest on Fannin, but I've already spoken on this podcast about how much I like Tucker Kraft as a tight end, how good he could be this year. And again, that's actually a little more than a round later. Then if we look past that, I think we see Sam Laporta now 2.5 rounds later. Kyle Pitts, that's a little bit later. Again, I think Tyler Warren's going to have a monster year. I'm going to probably wish I had a lot more of him than I will end up having, but I think that's simply because during drafts, anecdotally, I think I'll see several viable options remaining of what I can consider at least decent to elite tier tight ends that I may not pull, kind of the trigger on him. But so again, it's not an avoid, but I think his cost will it'll creep up as we approach draft season even more. So I don't think I'll have that much of him.
I think that makes a ton of sense. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think the hype is through the roof, especially after last season going into this one. Like I said, the biggest question mark is QB play for this team right now.
Yeah. That's what concerns me the most about Tyler Warren. And you know, if you guys didn't watch our last video, we talked about the NFC North and talked about a lot of the tight ends that Vishy just mentioned. Colston Loveland is going right above him as the tight end 3. And then you already talked about Tucker Kraft and Sam Laporta also in that division. I feel more comfortable about those offenses, those quarterbacks, and just kind of overall about those scenarios, especially at cost for the 2 that you brought up, Vishy. So that makes a ton of sense to me. Will, do you have any additional avoids?
The only avoid I got is Anthony Richardson, unless I see that position designation change to something else. You know what I'm saying? So,
are you drafting him if he's a tight end?
I might take a little look. I'm not gonna lie. I'd be a little interested, but other than that, no.
All right, fair enough. I say that we move on to the next team here in the division. Let's go to the Titans. Vishy, any thoughts there? Any targets?
Let me scroll a little bit. Yeah, I do, and I think I can actually pretty comfortably list him as a target. So none of these guys, you know, for context, with respect to ADP, are going early. I'm going to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson here.
Hell yeah.
None of these guys are going particularly early. I mean, I think Carnell might have the highest ADP. Carnell Tate, they're rookie, and that's like in the 6th round or something. So just to put in reference, this is the kind of the opposite of some of the teams we talked about last episode, like the Bears or the Lions. That being said, I think here, if we look at a target, we're looking for someone who will outproduce their ADP. And Wan'Dale Robinson is likely going to start off the season, at least for the first couple of weeks, I'm going to project as like having the most fantasy points as a wide receiver on that team. I think Carnell Tate will end the season as a wide receiver 1. This is a really common rookie trope where even if they start a little slow, like they're establishing why they were drafted so early on by the end of the season. But I think this is a guy who's going to be the wide receiver 1 on a team with Cam Ward, who it could be exciting. This could be a fun offense to watch. I don't really know what'll come out of it much, but Wan'Dale is very cheap. I mean, he's the wide receiver 46 is what he's being drafted at. And so I think he's a great value in the middle rounds to start off their season with a couple wins on your schedule before you kind of start cranking. Maybe some of your younger players start breaking out later in the season.
I absolutely 100% agree. I had the same player listed as a target for this team. Keep Trey Cuddy's the wide receiver 39 there. And yeah, when you just look at the situation, I think it's one of those wheels up type of situations. One, they signed him for a good amount. It was 4 years, $70 million, up to 78, I think, with incentives. He's only 25 years old. He's been a steady contributor pretty much his entire career. And now he's in a situation where he can at the very least be a top 2 receiving option. And he's at a team where he's reunited again with Brian Daboll, who drafted him in the first place. Yeah. And just to bring a quote, because I've seen a lot of people saying Wan'Dale is going to strictly be a slot receiver. And while I think that is a main place he's going to be at, I think that's where he's going to thrive at. Just a quote from Brian Daboll when they first drafted him. I think he can play inside, and I think he's strong enough and fast enough, even though he's a smaller, shorter guy, that he can contribute outside too. Again, what we're trying to do is put as many generating pieces out there and try to create a pace and stretch the field, whether it be vertically or horizontally. And this is another guy that has the ability to run after the catch, which is an important aspect of that. I think that same philosophy is going into this. I think that's why the team went after him in free agency. It felt like this was Brian Daboll going and getting one of his guys. So I'm excited about this in the situation. Cam Ward continues to just be the biggest question mark.
Yeah. We're all in lockstep. I had him as my clear target as well, and I think you guys put it extremely well. The only thing that I wanted to add is just onto Will's point about, like, even if he does stay in the slot exclusively, Daboll runs 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets at one of the highest rates in the NFL, dating back to 2021, I think. So it shouldn't even be a problem. He should still get a full-time snap share in that case. So I don't have anything else to add, like as far as a specific player. But I did think it was interesting to note that Ryan Heath, in an article he put out recently, compared this team to the 2025 Saints. And I think that there's kind of some merit to that, where like questionable quarterback play, where like the success or failure of the offense rides on it, whether that be Cam Ward or Tyler Shuck last year. I think that there's fantasy value to be had, even though they're almost certainly going to be a bad team because their play callers call a high volume of plays per game. So Brian Daboll in this case versus Kellen Moore. Daboll ranks 5th among active play callers in plays per game since 2021. So some interesting parallels. Whether or not it works out, I don't know, but it could be a more fun offense than we're kind of banking on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this might be kind of a funny take, but I think there's some merit to it. I think I would have trusted Wan'dale less if they didn't draft Carnell Tate. I think that he might have been less likely to succeed in that kind of wide receiver one role with the attention on him if he was going to be that focal point of the offense. I think that's just a big burden to carry. But now that there's Carnell across from him, likely pulling a good corner over there, or at least opening up some of the schemes that he can play, I think he's actually going to thrive. I think he's going to do a little better.
I think that makes sense. Pretty reasonable to me. All right, so I think that'll do it for the targets on that team. Will, do you have any avoids specifically for this group?
The biggest avoid that I have is probably Tyjae Spears. Out of everybody in this running back group, he's probably the one that I believe in the least. I feel like he really hasn't gotten a whole lot of burn unless Tony Pollard hasn't been available. And with the acquisition of Nick Singleton, who I really think is going to end up probably taking over this backfield at some point in the future, I just don't think there is too much room for Tyjae to also find at least, enough success for it to be fantasy viable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had him as one of my avoids as well. And not really soft. I think kind of just generally not too interested in Tyjae, even at his cheaper cost. I'm going to tack on one more that's also rather low ADP. That's Calvin Ridley. Usually it's kind of weird because having an avoid with kind of a lower ADP might not be that necessary. Like they're usually at a lower ADP, there's still some continued upside if the players ahead of them in the depth chart get hurt. I just don't think either of these players have really that high of a ceiling, even if there's injury to those in front of them. Like Will said, I think if Tony Pollard gets hurt and Nick Singleton steps in kind of in a 1A type of role, and even if Carnell Tate and Wan'dale Robinson get hurt, like I don't think Calvin Ridley is capable at this point in his career of producing kind of that wide receiver one season. So for that reason, I think both of them are kind of avoids for me.
Yeah, that's who I had listed as my two avoids as well. Yeah, I'm definitely worried about kind of the age cliff hitting Calvin Ridley here pretty soon. We've seen his efficiency start to decline, and this is the best target competition he's had on a team since he was with the Jaguars back in 2023, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, for all those reasons, I'm out on him. And similar with Tyjae Spears, Will said it well. Nick Singleton kind of makes his skill set redundant in that offense. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And we can move on to, I guess, our last team here in the Texans. Vishy, if you want to start us off, do you have anybody you're specifically targeting on this team? It was kind of difficult for me.
Yeah, I think I'll list two targets. These might be contentious. Consider me opening discussion. And they're on opposite points of the ADP spectrum. So that's going to be Nico Collins. I'm curious where you have it. It should be around 26. Yep. And then Tank Dell, who you're going to have to scroll for a while. You don't have to go find him, but I think he's going to be in the 200 somewhere. I think CJ Stroud is a capable QB. This offense seems to run a lot of plays. And I think in the case with Nico Collins, I think while this kind of wide receiver room gets a little crowded pretty quick because they're two rookies last year, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, I think Nico Collins is still the undisputed wide receiver one. And I think the undisputed wide receiver one in a team, well, CJ Stroud has had his ups and downs, but when he has his downs and he throws a lot of picks, those are just favorable game environments to me. So Nico Collins all the way. And his cost is like early third round. So I think early third round for a wide receiver one is pretty intriguing. That's a price that I'm definitely willing to pay. I would even take him in the late second. And then with Tank Dell, I think he's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. He's obviously very inexpensive coming off a horrific injury like a year and a half or 2 years ago. But he was very talented while he was there, and I think that makes him like a very, very, very cheap kind of last round or last couple round of best ball type of flyer. That if he kind of has a bounce back season to what even like half of what he used to be, he's giving you like 100 points of ADP value. So no, I'm kind of interested in both of them.
I like it. Will, what do you think?
I like that take. I like all the weapons here, to be honest with you, but I think those are the two you should probably bet on the most, or at least bet on a good bit. Especially at cost. But with kind of rolling into that, one of my buys was CJ Stroud. I just feel like, one, the weapon group around him is just, again, too talented. If you guys saw that we were talking about guys like Jared Goff, who are he's going a couple spaces afterwards. But I think with CJ Stroud, it's one of those situations where I think things are going to get better, especially when they brought in OC, what's his name, Nick Caley. He was the pass game coordinator and a tight ends coach for the Rams recently. So I think that's going to bring at least a little bit of a different flavor to this offense. And a light buy for me in this offense, kind of just seeing like the rookie minicamp stuff. Marlon Klein has been looking pretty good out there on the field, to be honest with you. I was surprised to see him pick him up. I don't think he's going to be someone that's going to, break the doors off the offense immediately. But at least, in the future, he's someone developmental that this offensive coordinator went out, the team went out to get, and he is a tight ends guy. So he's not even listed here as someone.
I guess not.
Yeah, but I think he's someone that you could at least have on your radar a little bit.
Deep sleeper. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll kind of piggyback off of Vishy's, I guess, because I think that Tank Dell is definitely an interesting guy to target. And I think for that reason, I guess I'm going out of order, but I guess I'm avoiding Jaden Higgins at his ADP. Let me pull him up just to make sure I'm not off. That's the wrong Higgins. Jaden Higgins. There's too many of his name. There we go. Okay, so he's going at wide receiver 54. And yeah, Tank Dell, people might get it confused because he's so small, but he's not a slot receiver. He's played over 70% of his routes from out wide for the Texans throughout his career with them. And Jaden Higgins runs 80% of his routes from out wide after last year. And so if there's going to be a target competition between any of these guys specifically, like head to head, I do think it's going to be between Higgins and Tank Dell, whereas Jalen Knoll is more likely to be kind of that slot guy if they continue to have like a full-time slot in 11 personnel, which another interesting point. Will, you brought up Nick Caley. There's at least some intrigue as to whether or not they'll incorporate more multi-tight end sets after last year. I think they were dead last in the league. I think they ran 11 personnel at the highest rate of anybody. But if they start running more multi-tight end sets, then I think that benefits Nico Collins the most and really just kind of cannibalizes all of the rest of the receivers and makes it tough for anybody to produce. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And then David Montgomery is kind of loosely a buy for me. I honestly think that his ADP is pretty reasonable. I was just struggling to find somebody that I was like super high on this team. But I do think that at the running back position, volume is king, and I expect him to get a lot of it. This team had the best defense in the league last year, and they kind of like dragged the offense into the playoffs. We saw CJ Stroud struggle with some turnover issues, which I think could be remedied, to Will's point about him potentially bouncing back. But if that continues to be the case, or if they just don't want to trust the passing game that much, then they're going to feed David Montgomery the rock. And it's going to be a lot different than what they were working with last year and Woody Marks and like the shell of Nick Chubb.
No, I absolutely agree. I had David Montgomery also as like a light buy for the team as well. I think, he's on the worst side of 26, but at the same time, anytime he's gotten the opportunities, he's been pretty efficient with them as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a talented, and he's RB1 on that team. And if their defense holds up the same, he could get more volume than he did in the Lions, which is still some decent volume. So I think I'm excited about him. And then I agree. I really don't have much to add in terms of avoids. Eric already alluded to Jaden Higgins. I might toss Jalen Knoll in there. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty, especially if they move to these kind of 12 personnel sets with those two receivers, because I think they're strictly behind Nico. So for that reason, I'm not particularly interested in them, even if they showed kind of some flashes last year with a hot game here or there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any specific avoids, Will, or are we good to wrap this thing up?
I think we're good. I think we touched base on everything just about.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I don't have any specific evidence necessarily that Nick Caley is going to run more multi-tight end sets.
Mm-hmm.
I just know based on where he's coming from that's within the range of outcomes. And so it's food for thought.
I mean, it's in the range of outcomes, and then KTC will have to add one on Klein, man. That's
there we go.
Yeah, they're benefiting Nico Collins and him for the program.
To say he's from the McVay coaching tree, so.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They're going to draft 2 more tight ends next year then.
Yeah. But I think that will do it for us. Thank you guys for sticking with us till the end. If you did, we appreciate you as always. Let us know what you guys think of this division and any other division, people that you're targeting or avoiding it down in the comments below. We'd love to get your opinion and chop it up with you guys. If you enjoyed what you saw, please do leave a like on it. Let us know. And also hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all of our latest releases. But I think that'll be the end of it for us. And we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.